We've been in the midst, what I think is like a super fun message series. It's called Don't. And so we started out week one, like, don't go to church. Like, please tell all your friends, don't go to church. Please don't go to church. What we'd like you to do, we'd like you to walk with God, walk with Jesus in every area of your life. We'd like you to integrate your life with Him so that as you walk with Him, He's working inside of you and is actually through you impacting the world around you. And so we laid out some of those rhythms that we thought and think were really helpful. And then last week was somewhat of a convicting week for me. It was like, don't go to a gym. Like, please don't go to a gym. But let's get healthy. Let's get physically healthy. And I was probably a little more me-centered than I should have been last week, talking about all of my health junk that I'm working on, all the cucumbers I'm eating, etc. Had another good week with that. There's a little seasoning. I don't even know what it is. What's it called? Tahini. It's from the Lord. It makes cucumbers bearable. And so good. One of the things that I didn't mention last week, and what we talked about was this, is like, in order for you and I to step into all the things that God has for us in 2019, it's important that your health is as good as it can be. And you only have one body, I only have one, and you only get one shot at this deal. You don't get to 80 and say, I think I'll do a do-over. Can I go back to 20 and try to do that one again? It does not work that way. And so it's important for us. Our physical health helps us to be more available to what God has for us in our lives. It's just that simple. One of the things I didn't mention last week that I wish I would have done is that your physical health is mind, body, and soul. So there also may be this sense of, even if mentally or emotionally, there are some things that aren't on track for you within your life, in the same way that you might need to change your eating habits, you might need to change your exercise habits for your physical fitness, i.e. your weight and all the things that happens with that, your heart, and etc. You may need to step into a space where someone can help you when it comes to your emotional life, whether that's anxiety or worry or whatever it may be. Let me just say this. There's nothing wrong. It's never been wrong in my life when I've had something going on and I've said, you know what? I need someone who is a professional, who's trained to help me have clarity about the worry or anxiety I have, i.e. going to see a counselor. There's never anything wrong with going to see a counselor. There's always something right about that, okay? And so if you're in a place where it's like, I need a strategic outsider that can actually speak truth to me to help me in this, I just think it would be crazy not to do that. It'd be crazy. If you're ever in a place like that and you don't know where to go, I know there are a couple of folks that I've entrusted with my children, with my marriage, with my life here locally, and other folks as well. We'd love to point you in that direction. But don't go to a gym. But let's be holistically healthy as we move into this new year. And I think, taking a step back, I just say the whole series is really designed in a way of, we want to integrate your life, right? Or we want you to have a life that's integrated, that's a whole life. So on all the different fronts of your life, you're prepared to step into everything that God has for you this year in 2019. It's kind of like this. Like, before a team goes out to play, like, the coach always tries to give them a little, go get him, Tiger. You can do this. Little pep talk. I feel like as you step into the game of 2019, I think these few weeks are really that. it is the pregame. So when we finish up the last week, we're going to have a big thing you're going to run through with like smoke will come out, and no, I'm kidding. We'll have jerseys for you to wear. But I really hope that you're like, okay, yes, this is the locker room talk. It smells way better in here than a real locker room. This is the locker room talk, and we're going to help you get ready to run after the game of life that God has for you. So today is Don't Fix Your Marriage. Please don't fix your marriage. We're going to jump into that this morning. My youngest daughter is in 5th grade, and so that is the year for us where Amanda and I, we have the talk. We have the talk. And so we've been putting it off, and this week was the week. So we said, Lexi, we need to talk to you. Am I in trouble? No, you're not in trouble, but it might be awkward. Side note, I just say for any of you all, parents who have kids, 4th, 5th grade, 5th grade may be too late, honestly. I just think it's important they hear from you about sex because they're going to hear from the world, and they need to hear from you first. They need to hear from you first in the midst of that. So we're talking with Lexi. I'm just reminded, Mitchell's like, honey, God's created you for someone. And he's created someone for you. And at some point, you run a company that's called Lexi Pullins LLC, and you're hiring, and it's a long interview process. And if ever you're interviewing someone and they don't qualify for the next step in the process, you just fire them. And at the end of the day, here's what you're looking for. You're looking for someone that loves you like I love you. And until you find that, it's a no. She's like, oh, I got that, Daddy. But I said, but when you find it, honey, it's so beautiful because God's created you for it. And that relationship with your husband is different than any other relationship on the face of the planet. And the gift that you all get to share is sex, and it's beautiful. And she's like all red, and I'm like, and honey, like, and the world has made it so ugly, but it is such a beautiful thing. And it's your gift that you give to your husband, and it's the gift that he gives to you. And so it's not for anybody else. And so if you give that gift to someone else who hasn't been hired for the job, you're stealing from them. And you don't want to do that, do you? No, Daddy, I don't want to do that. I'm like, that's what I want to hear. But it just made me reminded of just how intimate a marriage relationship is on so many different levels. It's the one relationship often in our lives where, we're able to be vulnerable, like completely naked. And I don't just mean physically, like my whole self. And I entrust that to the other. It's just a special, special place. And let's be honest, it's often at times the most stressful relationship that we have in our lives. Amen? At least at my house, sometimes it is. Let me say it this way. Marriage is not something that you fix. Marriage is not something that you fix. Marriage reveals your character. Marriage is not something that you fix. Marriage is the one of the main tools that God uses to reveal your true character. So now this morning, we are talking about that, but you may be here and you may not be married, okay? You may be single and chosen that life, and we would celebrate that with you. You may be too young to be married, or you may be thinking about maybe one day that I will be. I would just say this, that there are going to be a lot of things we talk about today that will apply to the other relationships of your life. Okay, so I don't want you just to turn it off because like, I'm not married, today's not for me. There are going to be a lot of things I think that God can speak to you today that will help you in the other relationships of your life. And we're going to talk through the lens of marriage. So in our flesh, in our flesh, we try to fix our marriages. And often what happens is we try to add quick fixes that are just Band-Aids to a deeper incompetency that's there. So sometimes we try quick fixes that are just Band-Aids to the deeper incompetency that's there. In our flesh, we try to point out all the things that the other one needs to work on. So in my flesh, I find it easy and natural to point out all the things that Amanda needs to change. Super easy to figure that out. My guess is in your flesh, it's easy and natural for you to point out all the things that you want your husband or your wife to change within their life. Their priorities, their fitness, their attitude, their view on sex, like whatever it may be. And oftentimes in our flesh, we see every detail they need to work on, and we ignore the reality that they see every detail we need to work on. So like I play this game where I see every detail Amanda needs to work on, and then I pretend that she doesn't see any of the details I need to work on, or they're not as obvious as hers are. Anybody else play that game? I think at times in our flesh, it's really easy as husbands and wives that we can use our spouses. We can use them. We take them for granted in our flesh. And all of that, I just think it's good to say, like, that's sin. That's missing the mark. That's missing the mark. Let me say it this way. Marriage is simple. It's super simple. It's just hard. It's simple. It's just hard. And you know, we might say amen to that. It is hard to live with you. Amen to that. It's hard to live with you. And at the same time, we maybe don't realize that it's actually harder to live with me within our lives. Jesus, he gives us a great picture. I think it's so helpful. Gives some insight. He has a sermon that's recorded in the Gospel of Matthew. It's the Sermon on the Mount. We're going to be in Matthew chapter 7 today, 3 through 5. I just think this little scripture is somewhat of the secret sauce to healthy relationships. And I think it's a great lens when it comes to our marriages, So Matthew chapter 7, if you haven't read through the Sermon on the Mount, it's so helpful. There's so many things that Jesus addresses as he's talking to this crowd. It's interesting that as he begins the Sermon on the Mount, it seems as if his disciples come to him and he starts to talk to his disciples, and then a great crowd gathers around. And it's almost as if Jesus knows the crowd, not all of them are going to get it. It's going to kind of go in one ear and out the other. But you disciples that are here in front of me, like, I need you to hear this, because this is my ethos. This is what I'm thinking. This is the life that I want to run and want you to run after. And so in chapter 7, he says this, verses 3 through 5. He says, "Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye. I mean, it's interesting because a log is bigger than a speck. Does that make sense? Like, if you were doing like math and the greater than sign, you'd have log greater than speck. And Jesus is like, why is it so easy for you to see the less obvious thing in someone else's life, and you can't see the obvious thing in your life? Or how you can say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when there is a log in your own eye. Like, my guess is a log is more uncomfortable in your eye than a speck, because a log is bigger than a speck. It seems that it would be a little more uncomfortable. But Jesus is like, why is it more comfortable for you to keep a log in your own eye and actually try to take the little speck out of someone else's eye? And then if we haven't got it by now, he says, you hypocrite. First, take the log out of your own eye. In other words, look here first. Look here first. And in marriage, the temptation is we always look there first. So I always like, let me look at Amanda first. And then after, I'm like, oh, I should look at myself too. That's helpful. That's helpful. No, how about look here first, Chad? Look here first. And then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brothers. In other words, Jesus is like, we don't want the speck to remain there. Having anything in your eye is uncomfortable. It is. Even a little eyelash. You just... So we don't want the speck to remain, but you gotta get the log out of your own first. And then with that, you can help take the speck. In other words, when the other person knows that you're working on removing the log, the incompetency from your life first before projecting something onto them, they're much more apt to hear from you about the speck in their own eye. Jesus doesn't say, remove the log and they get to keep the speck. He just says, focus on you first before we move on to the other thing. I just think it's a great lens for us when we're thinking about relationships. And I think it's a great lens when we're thinking about our marriage relationship. So if you don't know, let me just remind you this morning that we all have logs in our eyes. Okay? All of us. We all have deep incompetencies that we need to work on. And part of the beauty of being a follower of Jesus is he doesn't hold those incompetencies against us. But he actually says, let me help you grow through them. Let me walk with you through them. Now, he is a little annoying, all right? Let's just be frank. It's annoying because as soon as you get done with one incompetency, he wants to show you another one. And quite honestly, I'm like, will we ever get to the end of it? Because it just feels like there's a lot here. And he's like, well, maybe you're not as competent as you thought you were, Chad. There's a lot to work on. So there is that piece of it. And when it comes to our marriage, it is so easy for us to see the speck in our husband's eye or the speck in our wife's eye. And it's easy to ignore the plank in our own. It is so easy for me to see the little things in Amanda's life that I think she should change. And it is so easy for me to think I've got it all together. And my guess is that that's pretty normal for the room. doesn't mean that we aren't able to handle all that in a healthy way. I just think that sin bends us in that direction. Now, the other lens is this. We all like to be good neighbors, don't we? I mean, we want people around us to like us and to appreciate us. And sometimes we'll go out of our way to be neighborly. And then when it comes to our closest neighbor, our husband or our wife, sometimes we're not good neighbors. You know, we're just not nice sometimes. And sometimes they do see the worst in us, which is, it's not bad as far as seeing the worst in us, but when we don't put the same effort in being neighborly to them as we do those who are not as close to us, it's like I'm just taking Amanda for granted. Let me just, I think this is the punch for this morning. Marriage is not about making you happy. Marriage is about making you holy. Marriage is not about making you happy. Marriage is about making you holy. It is the relationship that will over and over and over again reveal your true character. So, there are parts of my character at times that I can hide from you. I don't get to hide those from Amanda. She sees it. She gets it. I mean, poor girl. Marriage is not about making you happy. Marriage is about making you holy. I think when marriage is about happiness, that's the goal. It sets both husband and wife up for failure. Let me say it this way. Happiness is overrated. It's overrated. Happiness is overrated. And so I don't want you to settle to just pursue happiness. I want us to pursue holiness. And holiness is about the more that us as husbands and wives can be mutually surrendered and submitted to each other. And the more that we as husband and wife are mutually submitted and surrendered to each other, the more joy that produces in our life. And joy is different than happiness. Because happiness is surface things. But joy is deep-seated reality that can carry us through the times when we're unhappy. I think that marriage is the vehicle that God, one of the key vehicles, not the only one, but one of the vehicles that God's given us as humanity to learn to love the way that He loves. Because His love, true love, is selfless love, is self-giving love. So don't fix your marriage, but instead ask, how do I need to die to myself and give my life to my spouse? Whew. I don't like that. I don't like that. But I know it's true. Don't fix your marriage, but instead ask this question. How do I need to die to myself and give my life to my spouse? Another lens I think is to be helpful. If you're married, you're in school. Okay? I'm enrolled in the University of Amanda. all right? And I'm working on my PhD. PhD in Amanda Studies. And God bless that woman. She's enrolled in the University of Chad. And she's currently working on her PhD in learning. If you're married, that's your job. Your job is to be a student of your husband, to be a student of your wife, to learn about them, to get your degree in knowing them unlike any other person on the face of the planet. Now, I know that you can do it. Like, I know that I can get that degree. And I know that you can too, because I know I put effort into other things. And I know that you put effort into other things. I watch you, and you watch me. You have effort. You can do it. So it's not of, no. It is a question of, am I willing to make that a priority within my life? I mean, here's a question that's been kind of messing with me this week. Like, Chad, imagine if you spent as much time studying Amanda as you did seeing her weakness. Whew. Like, imagine if you spent as much time studying your wife or your husband as you did noticing their weakness. Lord Jesus. And imagine if that was mutual. Imagine what that would do for our marriages. Imagine if you knew that yes, I'm gonna put all of this effort. I'm gonna put more effort into learning and studying my wife and my husband instead of seeing their weakness. And then you also knew that they were doing the same thing for you. Imagine what that could do for a relationship. Marriage is so important for us within our lives. And I think that we need to see our husband and wife as a gift. Our husband and wife as the main gift that God has given to you, that God will use to work on and reveal your character. Your husband or your wife is not there to make you happy. If you're depending on them to make you happy, you are setting them up to fail. They're there because God has given them as a gift that He can use them to reveal and work on your character. They are a means of grace that God will use to empower you to be the person that you were created to be. Marriage is a safe place where we get to constantly work on our character, and the place that we get to practice offering and receiving forgiveness when trespass takes place. So marriage is that place where we get to constantly work on becoming a better man or a better woman within our life. And it's also the place where we get to constantly, at least in my house, we do a lot of trespassing. Like, we get to constantly practice offering and receiving forgiveness. And granted, like most weeks, I mean, I know I project this stuff on you guys, and it's all my opinion. So you get to weigh it out. You get to weigh it out. But I just think the more that Amanda and I work on legit acknowledging when a trespass is there, not pretending, Do you guys pretend at all sometimes? You just sweep it under the rug? It's so easy, isn't it? It's so easy. Go to bed knowing you need to have this talk, but it just doesn't seem worth it. Am I talking to you? It's so easy. But the more that we legit acknowledge a trespass and legitimately actually say words like, gosh, I'm sorry. Will you forgive me? And we hear words back, yes, I will forgive you. I just get better at it with all of you all. You know, it's just practice. It's practice to be better with it out in the world that is around us. So I just want to leave you with a few things here this morning as we think about don't fix your marriage, but honestly become a student of your spouse. Enroll in that university. Ask the question of what do they need? What do they need? What are ways to love them well in the short and the long term? I just want to offer 3 things to you. I think I have these up here. So this is how you earn a PhD from the university of your spouse. So I want to talk about support, desires, and stress. So, support. What are their hopes and dreams? If you wrote down on a piece of paper right now, if it was a test, so this is your first test in your new enrollment, and it's an essay, it's not a multiple choice, because that's undergraduate work. You're in PhD work, okay? And we just said, will you list out your husband or your wife's hopes and dreams? And you wrote them down, and they looked at them, because they get to grade. Remember, they're the grader on all this. And they graded it where would that be? Do you know the hopes and dreams of your husband or wife? Their desires. Do you know what their desire for home is? Is a clean house important? Is order important? Is eating together important? Do you know what their desires are for home? Do they like to go to bed at the same time? Just what are their desires? Do you know what their desire is when it comes to attention? Because personalities are different. So for me, in my personality, my ideal conversation is be bright, be brief, and be gone. I like 60 seconds. Because I've got work to do, and if we talk longer than that, it's going to get away from my work. So it's be bright, be brief, be gone. Amanda's ideal conversation is, I need to know you care, which is about a 20-minute deal. And so if I come into the house and I'm Mr. Be Bright, Be Brief, Be Gone, it doesn't really fulfill her desires, which then hurts the third one for me. Do we just know what kind of attention, how they're wired? What's the desire of your husband or wife? Do they need space when they get home? Do they need, they need friends? They need time? What is that? Have you talked about that? When it comes to sex, what is the desire? How does that look like for your marriage? I've got a friend, his wife is a high J on the Myers-Briggs, planner. And for her, if you planned sex, that was the most spicy thing you could do. If she knew Thursday night was the night, holy cow, love, she's in, Now, some people may be wired the other way, that, no way, it needs to be spontaneous. If we try to plan it out, then it's just weird, and I don't want weird. That's not helpful. I'm just saying, do you know what are the desires of your spouse when it comes to that? Because, by the way, you're married, which means you can talk about that stuff. like you're married, you're one flesh. So you can have those conversations. When it comes to leisure, do you just know the desires of your spouse with leisure? Is your idea of a fun day off the same as their idea as a fun day off? And if not, where do those things mix and meet? And how can you empower that within their life? And then stress. When you just think about your husband, your wife, and the stress that they have, how they view the budget. Where does that fall for them? Does the calendar stress them out? What are they carrying at work? Or what are they carrying at home? And what's going on with the kids, if they are there? I just think if we won't just try to do a quick fix Band-Aid in our marriages, but if we actually just say, you know what, I'm absolutely committed to being enrolled in the University of You. And I'm going to do my best to make the dean's list. And for them to say, you know what, I'm going to do my best too. And I'm going to try to own all those planks that I see that are in my eyes before I point out the specks that I see in yours. I just think it's setting you up for a much healthier marriage in your life. So, don't fix your marriage. Invest into it. Invest into it. Fixing it means you're reacting. Be proactive. Be proactive. And I just think that God will bless it. And He'll use it to work in your life, unlike some of the other relationships in your life.